Okay, see you later. Right, Declan, go, for fuck's sake. We haven't got time for this.
How did you get racing cars on track for 10 years of Formula One cars?
Nothing to do with Formula One cars. Okay, how are we looking? Are you a bit beshaggled? Go ahead.
You look fantastic. I'm a bit beshaggled myself now. Listen, it's good to see you.
I'm really people hiding behind curtains there. I'm wondering what's going on behind there.
Oh, I have technical staff. That's Georgie. She's just done a runner. Fair play to her. It's Thanksgiving and she's from America, so we're in the middle of cooking turkeys and all that sorts of lunacy like that. So, good to see you. You tell us how you are and where you are.
Well, first of all, you look much more mature, you look more dignified, and you're doing a lot of good stuff. And I do read what you're doing. Where am I? Okay, are we ready to start?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, let's go for it. Yeah, fair play.
Well, as I speak, I'm speaking in Clifton, a very Irish name, in the middle of Cape Town. And it's a wonderful place that we found some years ago, sailing around the world, and came into this place and really liked it. So it took a little place that I come here in the wintertime just to make sure Marie does her photography, I do my cycling, and it's a good place to chill out in the wintertime at home.
And what occupies you? How was your COVID year, and are you busy?
If I was to tell you what I did today, you'd probably die, because I'm busier now than I've ever been. I was up early, did some work before I went to my Pilates. I ran to Pilates, which is in the middle of Sea Point, and about 20 minutes away, and then another 20 minutes back, plus an hour in the Pilates. I came back, had a tiny bit of lunch, and jumped on a board meeting with, I'm on the board of Oyster Yachts, and that keeps me busy. That was a 2.5-hour program. And I wanted to speak to you because next week is kind of manic. I'm going back to the UK next week anyway, depending now that the tier 1, 2, 3, all the different tiers are happening there. Probably live football. Not that I'll get tickets for that, but just the fact that people are able to get back to things. That normality, I hope, is beginning to happen worldwide.
Yeah, it's a bit like that for us as well. I mean, next week it's supposed to open up, but it's been a peculiar year. But I suppose that the nub of this interview is to find out what you are up to these days and what does fill your day, and how. I mean, I obviously want to reflect as much as possible on those crazy, hazy, lazy days of well, they weren't that lazy, were they? Of the 90s and the noughties in Formula One, but you're a while out of it now. I mean, do you miss it? Does it, or do you feel like you've moved on?
Oh, I'm not one who dwells on situations. I remember a long time ago getting great advice, and that is know when to go into something, but the most important thing in life is knowing when to exit, and a good exit or a correct exit. And I think the exit for me for Formula One was at a time where I really did believe that the funding, as far as what I could find for me and the team, yes, the TV money was going up and other aspects was going up, but the crucial thing, I mean, I was very loyal to Marlboro, I was very loyal to Benson and Hedges in particular, but their wings were clipped, so to speak, in terms of what they could do, and as a result, that reflected very much on our budgetary allocation. And we know in Formula One that there's certain things that you can do without vast amounts of money. But actually, at the end of the day, money does count for those little extra fractions of seconds that you see people struggling to achieve in terms of their qualifying or their racing. So I knew it was going to be a downward cycle. And as a result of that, I'd gone into it and I'd achieved more than what I'd expected. And I mean that in terms of Formula 4, Formula 3, winning all those races and winning the championships with the likes of Johnny Herbert and then, of course, Jean Alesi and Martin Donnelly and Jean Alesi, those people who won races for me in 3000. Because at that time, when I left those junior days, I think Jordan had won more major Formula 3 and 3000 races than any other team had. So I felt cool about going into Formula One, even though it was a massive risk. And I set a target in Formula One. I really didn't set a target. My main target was to try and survive it. And that was achieved because I left. I didn't leave under a cloud. I left with some shackles in my pocket, and I probably have used that in various different ways to try and grow it and make sure that the family were cared for and looked after. As is often a problem for me, and that is, I see some magic sports people that I look up to and adore in terms of what they achieve, and sometimes later in life when they've moved on from their sport, they struggle somewhat. And we only have to look at perhaps the great Maradona. Dying at 60 is such a ridiculously young age these days. I'm 72 and I feel so fit and I feel so strong. I would have just liked to have seen him give himself a better chance, and I'd urge all sports people to make sure that they plan for their future. It's one of the real critical areas.
Yeah, and so say all of us. I mean, in this week of all weeks. But take us back to the moment that you decided to go into Formula One. I would love to know what Marie Jordan thought when you said you were going to, because you put it all. I mean, you made money in the junior Formula, and that was no mean achievement. But it was, I won't say it was easier to do, but you had a pretty good thing going. It was a crazy thing to do, wasn't it? It was nuts.
On reflection now, the things that supports my argument in that is that it was completely mad. You're absolutely right, and I'm not looking for any accolades or whatever to say that maybe yes, I was crazy and I got lucky. But that's exactly right. I did get lucky because so many things happened that should have stopped me doing it. And in the junior formulas, I had the perfect opportunity. I came into those junior formulas where at the end of the 80s, or the end of the 70s, so 1980, I was still finishing up on the books of the Marlboro team, where I got lucky to get involved there. And there were people like James Hunt and Niki Lauda, Emerson Fittipaldi, even Prost came into it at a slightly later stage. And those people were hugely kind to me and made a big difference, because I was staring a situation where I'd married a young 18-year-old girl who was pregnant with Zoe. So what I was going to do, I was going to have to look after that. This was a family coming on. And so do I go back and work for the Bank of Ireland where I'd come from, or do I persist and try and make sure that motor racing was the chosen career that I wanted to achieve and do well at? So it was Niki Lauda more than anyone else. He said to me, please don't worry, Eddie. I've seen what you're able to do. Your financial skills we know about, and your commercial and your promotional skills. It's abundantly clear, because Marlboro were very keen to push me, and James Hunt in particular. We launched a brand called Raffles. So I owe a lot to Niki, and of course his sad death last year was a big blow for me personally, because I love the man, and he was kind to me. So he was the guy who made the difference in making me go into Formula Ford, Formula 3 and then 3000. And don't forget.
When did he say that to you, Eddie? Because or when? Yeah.
Oh, he said that to me. First of all, there was a group. Everybody thought that there was friction between him and James, but that never really was the case. In fact, they were great friends. And Niki, I don't know why, because he'd been driving for various different teams, but we became quite close. Because we kind of shared similar sort of birthdays. And he was from Austria, I was from Ireland. His big brother was Germany beside him. My big brother was England beside us. So we felt supportive of each other in front of these much bigger nations that were, I don't know why, but Niki has always been, right to the day he died, he has been a great, great friend. I can't put a finger on it. It's one of those things that always happened. Each time I did something, there was always somebody there to look out for me, or somebody to advise me, or somebody to give me counsel. And in every aspect, that's what Niki Lauda did for me.
And who said, listen, you should go for Formula One? That's a brilliant idea. And what did Marie Jordan say?
Well, now back to your original question. So the two major influences we've already discussed, Niki, and then the second one. So during that period, I had a lot of drive. Where I made the money was I had people like Kenny Atchison. I got Ross Cheever. I got Johnny Herbert. I got Donnelly. I got all sorts of different people, even Stefan Johansson, Pirro, and all of these guys. I sent them to Japan. So I was their manager. So not directly management, but I got them the seats in Japan for the Formula 2 championships. They were being paid 250, 220, 300 in some cases. And I was taking 10% for facilitating and putting together the contract and getting them to drive and getting them. So they were very happy. I was very happy. So that's where the money first started to roll. I didn't really ever in my lifetime probably make money out of any team. Because as soon as you got the money, you spent it. And if you didn't spend it, the engineers would spend it, or somebody would find a way to doing that. So as far as I'm concerned, we just bear me 1 second. Oh, just charging us up now. Are we plugged in? Yeah, I think so. Apologies about that, folks. But you know, it happened in 1989. Jean Alessi, again, fortune. I took him away from Marlborough to put him in a camel team. He didn't get a drive. The Shawneck wasn't happy with him. He came to me, crashed a couple of times. I made him come to England to live in Oxford. He lived with the family, the Jordans and the kids. They loved him, and having a driver like him around the place. So that made a lot of sense. And he, halfway through the season, he'd won in Pau, and then he won in Le Mans, and then he won in Spa. But during this time, there was an opportunity where the Camel Trophy was happening in Siberia. And Michele Alboreto, who was driving for Tyrrell at the time, he damaged himself or hurt himself, and he wasn't able to do the French Grand Prix. And of course, I rang the boss at Camel because I'd been winning these races. And I said, you've got to put Jean Alessi in the car. And they said, well, yeah, we'll have a word with Ken Tyrrell. I said, don't ask Ken Tyrrell because he's going to say no. You've got to be strong and say, look, this is a young up-and-coming driver under our umbrella. He's part of the Camel team. You've got to put him in the car. And I think that's how the conversation happened. And Ken went mental about it. He didn't want that to happen. With the result, he rang me telling me that, you know, he's not going to qualify. He's going to get blown up by Jonathan Palmer. And I said, well, look, I'm happy to see if that's what happens. That's what happens, Ken. I want him in the car. Take it what you like. I don't care about you, with the greatest respect. I mean, that's the way we used to speak to each other at that stage, because we're quite brutal team bosses and team owners that were really matter of fact. You know, there was very few niceties going around, but we're always good friends after the event. But during the event and the negotiations was always quite rigid, tough, brutal, horrible, all of those usual things. Anyway, Ken thought that we would be completely swallowed up by the whole euphoria, because it wasn't possible to give Jean a test, and he arrived. But as luck would have it, 4 of my drivers turned up. So Gasho was driving for Onyx. Piero was driving, I think, for Minardi. Martin Donnelly was driving for Lotus. And then I had John driving. So it was a bizarre situation from not having a driver in Formula One. Suddenly for the French Grand Prix, 1989, I had 4 drivers there. And of course, Jean finished 4th. So I'm in a roundabout way telling you what happened. Jean came back after that because I wouldn't let him go to Tyrrell. Tyrrell wanted to sign him immediately because he was embarrassed how quick he was and how good he was for the team, finishing 4th. He wanted to keep him for the remainder of the season, which I wouldn't let happen. I needed to win the Formula 3000 championship. So I had to be a little bit unceremonious with Ken and tell him what I thought about him and his idea. So that didn't happen. But what I did do was agree to allow and negotiate a contract with Ken for the 1991 year, was it? Yeah, 1990 year. And so that was huge for Jean getting his foot in there. But it was Jean who said to me, Eddie, I can promise you the Jordan team has every bit as good a chance of doing as good a job as the Tyrrell team. There's very little between us. There's the same interest, the same technology, there's the same kind of ambience and the feel about the team. And you should try and see how you can pull something together. So I owe him absolutely everything for saying, for giving me the push, because sometimes you need to be told clearly what are the chances, because when you're a gambler, which is what I am in some respects, you need to know what is the upside and what's the downside. What is the level of risk? And then you've got to balance risk against reality. And when you've got other things at risk, you talked about Marie, she's, you know, what she actually said is very clear. I went to her and I said, Maria, I really desperately want to do this. She said, I know you do. And she said, we've got 4 kids. And bum, bum. I said, Marie, look, I've made 5 million quid out of, which is a huge amount of money. And I've made it, which I never thought I would make, from all these drivers, facilitating these drivers at various different races in Japan or Formula One, whatever. And she knew I was putting this all at risk. And I remember what she said, which was very cool, and it was just matter of fact. She said, look, you're never going to be happy if you don't do it. And if we lose it all, we'll only go back to where we were at the beginning. And, you know, that was quite fun. So just make sure you don't lose it all and do whatever you can. And that's all I needed. But it was a very short conversation. There was no, you know, dwelling over the situation. And then, of course, I knew what I wanted. I wanted Gary. I wanted Gary Anderson more than anyone else. For me, he was my dream ticket.
Why Gary?
He's the most practical person I have ever seen in my life, not just in motor racing, in my life. He's an absolutely outstanding man, human being, good family man, very tough. He could argue till the cows came home, but you know, he was a big, strong man, and I was a little Dublin boy, and I was giving him as hard as he could give it to me. So we fired off each other. I would say we possibly agreed on about 50 or 60% of whatever we came up with. There was always a little bit of, and you know, that was very positive because he'd always challenge my decisions, but I'd always challenge his. So he needed that. And sometimes he'd sort of say, throw the toys out of the pram and pretend to walk out, or do walk out. Him and John Boy Walton, I mean, it was hilarious what the two of them used to get up to. One a Dubliner and one from Castle Jordan, of all places. And, you know, they were just the most amazing days of my life, because not alone was he designing a Formula One car, but I had him engineering in Formula 3, Nispetti, and Frentzen and Eddie Irvine, because they were my 3 drivers, I think, in 1990. So I was a glutton for punishment, and I was making sure that I kept the Formula 3000 team in case the Formula 1 team would go bankrupt. That was really my real stopgap situation, that I would at least be covered, that I wouldn't be slung into some slammer or other jail as a bankrupt, which happened, or should have happened, but didn't eventually. And I got away with it, so I didn't go bankrupt.
And was that your greatest achievement, getting through, you know, still being open when Sasol rang? Or you know, where do you compare it to Spa 98 to
no. Spa 98 was, it was a great day, but it pales into total insignificance when the task that I believe that my job was, which was to give the team the stability and the financial structure foundation that it could survive. So for me, beyond any doubt, the biggest thrill or the biggest achievement I feel that Eddie Jordan had in Formula One was actually surviving Formula One. It wasn't about results, although they were a pleasure when they were good, and not such a pleasure when they weren't so good. But nevertheless, I think that what you have to remember, that all of the teams that came in the pre-qualifying, and every single thing that was sent against us, the chances of survival were slim. And I think even to this day, Bernie will tell you why he thinks Jordan was one of the teams that he liked more than anyone else, because they took the chance. They never spent more than they got. They always tried to hold a bit back. Now, that statement is not accurate, because we did spend a lot more than we used to spend, promises and all sorts of things. But you know, that's how we got it. He came to the party. Sometimes I would be bankrupt virtually, and he would lend me some money. There was a Dublin man who came to the party at one stage. I prefer not to mention his name. When the bailiff was there and we had a winding up petition in October 1991, just after the Michael Schumacher situation, and I got as much money as I could out of Mercedes for that, and out of Michael, of course, and other people. Audi gave us 800 grand off our engine bill as a result of giving them one of Michael's cars. And so you can't imagine the skull, you know, what was going on in terms of trading and dealing. It was much more than Formula One. It was like survival time. So
I have heard the story that in 1991 at that time that you literally had a winding up order for the afternoon, and if this particular finance didn't come in by 4 o'clock, that you were done. And this man flew over from Dublin. Is that correct?
Well, we'd known each other from school days, and we're still associated in terms of friendships. But I'm an investor in some of his businesses, and he in mine. In small capacities, but nevertheless, he is an outstanding person. And I wouldn't want to say his name without getting his permission. And if I did ask him, he'd probably say no. But he came to me and I said, listen, Michael, I know what you look like. You don't need to come. This is a crisis. Do you know anyone who might want to put £1 million into something that I can't guarantee we're going to get back? And he said, well, let me come and have a look. I said, well, look, don't bother getting on the plane. It doesn't matter. He said, but I do want to get on the plane. And I sent up a guy who used to work for us called Paul Jordan to pick him up at the airport. He arrived at about 11 o'clock. In banking circles, there's a thing called a CHAPS system. The CHAPS means that the clearing of the money has to be done by a certain time. So I think 4 o'clock was beyond the date. So it was 12 o'clock midday. The money had to be lodged in a CHAPS system so as there would be full accounting and credit. In other words, cash available to the other side. Which at the time was Vickers, and they had to have the money, which was £1 million. And that'll tell you there was probably about 25-30 minutes in the difference, and that's how we got the money. It's absolutely true story. It's funny, we laugh about it now, but you know, he's the most perfect person. He tries to keep it really under everybody's hat, so he doesn't get the claim.
And it was days later, weeks later, that that Sasol rang, and that that was the deal from the manna from heaven, wasn't it? Yeah, and then free terrible engines.
Well, you say that, but you know, Bernie said, if you can survive this, I'll get you engines, and I couldn't have survived without Yamaha. So as much as we may be critical of Yamaha, I'll certainly never be critical of them, because they gave me a platform to be able to race that I wouldn't have been able to get anywhere else. And just to finish on that Sasol thing, you know, out of the blue, this Irish guy living in Africa, advisor and lawyer to Sasol, had asked somebody about how do I get in touch with a guy called Eddie Jordan. And I had this call, and you know, you get all sorts of different calls from various people, and you kind of dismiss them, or you say to the secretary, look, I'm busy, I can't take that call now, or whatever it is. But I just happened to lift the call, and I said, he told me his name was Brian, and I said, yeah. He said, look, I qualified in Queens, and I'm living in Africa. I'm working for an African group. Apartheid has just finished, and I've been charged with the task of getting Sasol, who make oil from coal. I need to give them a platform which to become more commercially aware and vibrant in terms of a more worldwide exposure. And I said, well, I'm the man. What kind of money are we talking about? And a figure of 6 was mentioned, and I said, 6 what? And he said 6 million. And I said, oh yeah, keep going. And so we met him, and after a while, and I met the board then. I came to South Africa, met the board of Sasol, and within a very short time, I said to them, look, here's my opinion, if you want to give my viewpoint on this. As soon as you do something for a year, you'll be only into it when you're not able to promote it or to add value or to leverage it or whatever it is. If I were you and I was your boss, I would take it, I would do it on a minimum of 3 years. So I walked out of that office with a 3-year contract. I mean, I've just been Irish, been cheeky, but also been realistic. What you can achieve in a program of advertising or a program of promotions in 1 year is negligible compared to what you can, you know, you leverage it up, you roll it out, you make sure you're actually attacking all the different areas that you want to get full value from. And what I was able to do, which is what they wanted, and it gave them full value for the money in one hit. Because of the Barrichello connection and previously with Senna, I was able to give them a full introduction into Petrobras, because they made oil from sugar beet, and because the two were actually quite aligned. And where these companies make their real money is not through the petrol station. I'm sure they make money there too, but it's down the line. It's things like Vaseline or the lubes and the various other things and soaps. We've no idea, most of us, the amount of products that rely on petroleum jellies and the different aspects, whether it be ships or boats or planes, and then further on down the pharmaceutical line. It's an amazing thing. So they got their full value. They were delighted with it, and we were happy. We're off and running.
So the deals are what drove you. I mean, I've always known that to be true. But you look at Formula One now. Let's sort of compare and contrast. I mean, Jordan did bring a certain pizzazz to it, didn't it? I don't think I quite entirely understood it when I was in it to the level that I can see now with a little bit of perspective of time. It was quite a show, wasn't it? And do you see does that show exist now in F1, or have they taken the fun out of it?
Well, different strokes for different folks. I was at a time when it was rock and roll, and I think, with the greatest respect, I think the person who started to bring that into play was people like James Hunt. They were very cool, very casual. I remember all the French drivers, and we all used to convene in Plaza Mexico in the middle of Paris, and God, we'd have wild times, and people like Alio and people like Prost, and God be good to Sever, and people like, Peroni, some great French drivers at that time. But that was rock and roll era. And then it came into ours, and it was a bit more serious. However, Jordan always used the thing, particularly with Benson and Hedges, and Nigel Northridge, who was the chief executive, again, another Irish person. And, there's a huge amount of Irish involvement with Jordan. And we mustn't ever lose track of that. Quite apart from the support from the home people, I felt an obligation that I felt more comfortable with Irish people around me that I could really trust. So they came up with I remember Ian Phillips coming up and said, "God, this gold of the Benson and Hedges gold, so dreary, so drab, is shocking." So we kind of semi-fooled Benson and Hedges into being able to change their logo around to get the best maximum effect from television. And then we came up with the idea that it should be yellow. And then we put lots of metallic in it to give it the flex. So if you see, for example, the race you mentioned winning in Spa, the only car you can actually see in Spa was the Jordan car, because the fleck in the yellow just spun out of the spray. All the other cars paled into some sort of just background visibility. No one could see which car it was, but you could always see the Jordan car. And that was one of the key things. Then that color, we put intellectual property rights over that color because we made the paint. And then the girls we had on the grid, and whether it was Jordan herself or Melinda Messenger, and we had a whole host of lovely girls who were actual full-time models, and we used to put them on the grid, and people would take photographs of them, and that was always to Jordan's benefit. So in other words, we got a massively disproportionate amount of coverage for what we should have got, but that was my plan. When I would go to somebody like Benson and Hedges, I would say to them, "You give me 10 million, I will deliver for you 10 times that. I will deliver you 100 million's worth of media buying power and value for money in terms of awareness, but it will be based on a global." And so they were quite happy with the global aspect of it. And that's how I sold the deal. I used to sell everybody that I will deliver 10 times value. And when a company, and you're talking in front of major boards or major significant high rolling, well-educated financial people running major companies, they're not going to stick their neck on the block if they think someone is going to not deliver for them. So they want belt and braces. They want to be able to see the proposal, but they also want to see where the real value is for them. And mission statements like delivering 10 times value was quite hard sometimes for us to do it. But we would have, on a monthly basis, we would have a package of documents and letters and newspapers from New Zealand and from Australia and Japan, everywhere in the world. We would get every column inch where they were mentioned. We would make sure that they got it. and that's what kept us alive.
And you grew and grew, or at least certainly the results improved. You had your 94 and then 95 sort of wobble with the Peugeot, but it was still, the graph was upwards in technological terms. And then into the big years with Benson Hedges that you mentioned. But I suppose 98 was, it seemed like the apex. I read an interesting, and I guess 99, of course, yeah, third. But I read an interesting quote recently, I think it was from Mark Gallagher, but he was saying that in some ways, or maybe it was yourself, winning was made things more difficult by those two wins and running third in the championship, and even the other win in the Brazilian Grand Prix later on with Fisichella. By then it was almost a headache to win, because it changed what Jordan was about and how the company was constructed, and it took it to a new place and put you under more pressure, and that put the whole organization under more pressure than it could handle.
Yeah, if I may, Declan, I'll go back 1 second to what you touched on, and you said the difficult years with Peugeot. To be fair to Peugeot, they went from us, they went to McLaren, and they left McLaren to come to us. So there was a kerfuffle there. McLaren went to Mercedes, but we finished second and third with Irvine and Barrichello in Canada. And that's the best ever result the Peugeot ever had in all of their time in Formula One. So Jordan delivered in many respects for them, and that's why we say are massively connected to them. So roll it on into the years of 98 and where winning was a problem. I'm not sure. That must be Mark Gallagher saying that, because I'm not sure I would say, yes, it was a problem. But what it did was, life and people worldwide, and particularly Irish people, they like the underdog. And we were absolutely the underdog, because there was the Ferraris and there was the Williams and there was the McLarens and lots of different great teams at that time. I mean, we have to understand, that Honda came in there, and then Toyota, BMW, all sorts of, a whole host of people came in to try and dabble their hands at it, but they never were able to crack the stranglehold that Ferrari, Williams and McLaren had on Formula One. So that's why I think Jordan was protected in some ways by the wins that they had. It did nevertheless expose us to a different kind of pressure. And I think that's what you're alluding to. Nevertheless, I remember one guy, he was at BAT, and he said to me, he said, look, he said, Jordan, he knew I was really upset by not winning the championship in 99, because we certainly had the car to do it. And I thought Frentzen definitely had the ability to do it. And what happened in Nürburgring was so very sad, but that's life. We finished third. It was as good as I thought that Jordan could achieve. Secretively, even though I kept telling them that we can win the championship, and we were pumping everybody to do that. But sometimes when you'd sleep at night and you're dreaming in your bed and you say, Jesus, I'm not sure I really think we've outstepped our mark here. This is unbelievable. But, I would never let that be what my inner thoughts would be like. So I think what was said at the time was, Jordan, people love you for being an underdog. You will never be able to control or get the same love, affection, sponsorship ever if you become a consistent winner. And I think that's what he meant. But he actually meant that we should win every now and again. And I think that's what we did. So therefore, we didn't lose that underdog situation.
Right. But so within a couple of years, I mean, of course, you didn't sell out to Honda, memorably, famously. Do you ever think maybe I should have done that? At the time, everyone said you should have sold. Now, as it turned out, you got a similar amount of money. Would that be correct when you finally did decide to go?
Irish people love talking about money. I hate talking about money because
I didn't believe that for a minute.
We come back to that. I love dealing. The deal is much more important than the actual upside, the profit, or whatever it is, or the thing. So just to conclude the deal was the most important thing. Should I have sold it to Honda? What I found, absolutely loved the Honda people, but there was a thing at that particular time. I felt Jordan could go on to another level, and I had to be sure that I didn't sell myself, my family, or my team, or my people, or my sponsors, my friends. I shouldn't sell them short. And I was happy and had agreed and went to Japan, and Kawamoto came to Europe, and we were ready, and he was the chairman, and we were ready to sign the deal. And except for one small point, and that is, I asked them for, what would my title be, and where and what was my role, who would I be liaising with, and what did they see that situation being. And Kawamoto said, well, Eddie, there is no place for you in this. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't quite. I said, it's Jordan. And very interesting thing, what he said was, if you stayed in the team, the problem is that Honda would never be able to get the exposure that they need to get to justify coming in and owning a team, because you would be too strong a character within that team, and people would be connected to you. And I could see their point after he explained it. He said, purely marketing, Eddie Jordan has to be out of the program for us to get the full value for what we want. Not everyone could understand it. I didn't like it at the time, and I probably didn't want to understand it either, but probably now on reflection, knowing how major corporations operate, they need a journey, they need a roadmap as to where they're going, and they can't have, if you like, stigmas along the way that probably would cause them some problems. And for example, I could understand that I may want a certain driver, but they might want somebody else. And if you remember, they insisted that I had Sato, so I knew there would be a conflict. I had to get rid of Frentzen for Sato to be able to keep the engine. And I had really ructions with them over that. That was a fight that I don't think people would want to hear what some of my colorful language was at that particular time. But, that's the thing. You need to make a stance. And I'm extraordinarily tough, and I need to be tough. Yeah, my Irish blood comes out at that stage.
Do you miss it?
No, I'll tell you why, Declan, I don't miss it. Because I achieved as much as I thought I could ever achieve. Because I achieved it, when I say I don't mean that as if it's an ego trip. We never had an investor other than Dominic and Robert Pincus coming in for a short time, and then I bought my way back out of that. So Jordan Grand Prix started with two directors, Maria and myself. I never asked anyone to put themselves, their house, their families at risk for it. And Gary understood that. So he was a huge part of the success, and was rewarded for that. So people got rewarded. I find when you put people under share options and different types of things like this, you're inclined not to pay the person what they really are worth or what's deserved, because you think that there's maybe on a sellout that there's more revenue down the road. And I think it's false economy. When you're looking for instant impact, you don't see big footballs, or you don't see the Frankie Lamparts or Pep Guardiola or whatever it is. They don't have shares in their football teams because they're expendable. They can be sacked tomorrow, whatever it is. And I needed that inside the team, that I needed total devotion, I needed total loyalty, and I needed every sinew of their body concentrating on the car and what the commitment they had to Jordan Grand Prix. So that's how it worked. And I have no problem. I think nowadays, funny enough, I did a very long interview with Toto Wolff, who I have the most highest respect for, as a huge, but he came out with something and he said, Eddie, I would never have had the balls to be able to do what you did, because it's just not possible anymore. I work for Mercedes. Yes, they've given me a great platform. Yes, they've given me a great driver in Lewis. But there's a lot of corporate sponsors behind this program. But when you consider that everything that you did, you took full risk every year, every race, every day. So if I went into a race and the two cars crashed in the first corner, that was £1.5 million straight out of my bin. And whether or not we had the budget to be able to withstand that kind of pressure, not everybody is prepared to take that risk. And so it just rubbed off me. So I'm a deal maker, I'm a risk taker. So be it. A lot of Irish people are like that.
Yeah, you're segueing nicely, actually. You talk about the expense of it. Probably my personal highlight of Jordan would have been the Brazilian Grand Prix win, because it was just so extraordinary. It was just an amazing. But my recollection, one of the recollections, is that it cost you a lot of money because there were bonus payments to Giancarlo Fisichella, and it was definitely affecting you because you weren't necessarily as far up in the Constructors' Championship as you might have been.
Look, Declan, I'm not sure, and I can say this really from the heart, and I'm promising you it is. I don't think that there is anybody that I know that has been as lucky as me. I'm not sure I know anyone who has been dealt a set of cards in their hand that have come up shining a roses so many occasions. Sure, I've got lots of knockbacks, but they've been pushed to one side because I can only see forward. I'm a very positive-minded person, and I'm lucky that I was born with an ability to see things and with a vision. And I always believed that Jordan could achieve certain things. And it's something that in other lives, in other businesses, because somebody recently, they said, look, most sport people, they said 99% of sports people lose their money over a period of years when they finish the sport, whereas my business and the different positions that we have has grown exponentially, and from that point of view, it's not a question of money, and I promise you that. And I know Irish people like to quantify money. It's about doing the deal. It's allowed, yes, I've got a finger there and I've got another finger there and I've got there, and I like to see things growing in a way that I feel comfortable about. So Brazil,
it was a funny story, but yeah.
No, Brazil was the most bizarre situation of all time. So you qualify badly, we can see the writing on the wall. We're never going to compete it again at the front end of the grid. We have a lovely driver in the car called Giancarlo Fisichella, but he's world class, but he's not a mega star. He is not in the Vettel or the Schumacher. I think outstanding driver, but it starts to rain in the middle of the race, and that's where Gary Anderson was absolutely unbelievable, because we could make the call, just like it happened in France. We could make the call as to when we're trying to see into where the race team director, Charlie Whiting, how would he see this? And he would see this. There's no way we can finish the race because it's nearly dark. It's piddling down with rain. And there's cars flying off the track. Mark Webber is buried in the hedge. Alonso was down there. Somewhere else was there. I mean, it was just mayhem. And Alonso had a massive accident as well. Took a few people out, if I remember. And suddenly, Coulthard is leading. And of course, which most people think that the great gurus at McLaren always get it right. But they took him in. They took him in for fuel on the lap before, or the second lap before the 75% rule. And I'm saying, Jesus, we're in business here, because this could work out to our favor. So that was the end of Coulthard. And then, of course, there was Raikkonen, wasn't it? Raikkonen. Raikkonen turns up, and we pass Raikkonen, and then there was the kerfuffle about Charlie Whiting asked for the race. Obviously, had to be, because it was, once it gets to for your listeners, once it gets to 75% distance of a race, you can allocate full points, so therefore it was a full race. But once the race is stopped, it goes back one lap for the classification. But Charlie had confused the timekeepers, and he said, listen, guys, don't forget to send it back, that they have to allocate one lap less. But they'd already put that into their system.
It automatically did it. Yeah.
It automatically does it. So the results came out with the thing, and they said, well, Charlie said one lap before, so let's go one lap before. And that's why the podium showed Raikkonen winning the race. And of course, we had to go to the FIA, and everyone said you can never beat the FIA in a tribunal or a case in Paris, and we did, and we won the case. And there's a famous photograph of Ron Dennis giving me the trophy at Imola the following weekend. It was nice. It would have been nice to hear our own Negrina in Brazil, but that wasn't to happen. I think it didn't happen in Spa either, because they didn't have the Irish national anthem, which was a scandal, really, when you think about it. But so we were wrong.
I had the Artane Boys band met me at the airport after that, before the next race, and they handed me a CD copy of Our Own Naveen, played by Aaron.
So Our Own Naveen didn't get played, and people often ask me, because there was troubles at Spa, why did I ask for the British national anthem? And I said, well, it's very simple. I work and I live in Silverstone. It's the team and the place where gave us the most support. I had a team in France, and once we got popular, I started to win races. They didn't like it, and they made it really difficult for me. So full marks to the British people, because they opened their arms and they gave us the support that no other country would have done. So that was the reason why I came up with the reason why we should play the British national anthem. It was one of those things. It was sad, really, because I was so looking forward to hearing it. It's a very powerful anthem that we've got, and it's something that makes the hair still to this day stand on.
So you knew they wouldn't play Our Own Naveen at Spa,
but they didn't have it. But that was the problem. When they went on the green, and they said it's a British anthem, I said, "Are you crazy?"
Well, Damon won, so they were always playing that one anyway.
Well, no, they were doing that. But the team was always registered as an Irish team.
Yeah.
And they didn't understand that. So the RIAC, I was racing under an RIAC license. So good old Wilf always gave it to me for free, so it was a free one. So I had a full international license, but I always raced under an Irish license. Not many people were able to, because RIAC was affiliated to the great RAC, which is the British one. But I wanted to be associated at Dawson Street. It's where we grew up, and not far away, Sing Street, and all the great stories about Dawson Street. I mean, brilliant. And that's why they were obliged to play the Irish national anthem.
Yeah, listen, you touched on interviewing Toto Wolff. Of course, you've done a lot of great work in Formula One media yourself since you stopped as a team owner. But talk to me a little bit about the modern era. I mean, first of all, Lewis Hamilton, where does he fit? Where do you place him? Is he good for the sport? How do you compare him to Schumacher, who you obviously raced against and you had some personal experience of? Is Lewis the best ever? Are comparisons odious? And most particularly, is his dominance and is the team's dominance good for the series?
A whole lot of questions, all great questions there. I think the dominance is not good, but then you could have to say the Ferrari Schumacher thing wasn't good either. All the great champions, if you look at Prost and you look at Senna, there's an era where they dominate. And the drivers are so good that they're able to make the cars that they're driving better than what any other car. There's a philosophy, and that is the best driver always winds up in the best car. And that will always be the case. I don't care how long it takes. And the odd one out there is Alonso, because I think Alonso just went for money. And that's my opinion. And he could have been a 6-time world champion. He's that good. And so I think he missed the boat there. Coming back to Lewis, I've been now convinced beyond any doubt that Lewis is the best. And the reason I say that is because he's won more races than anyone else, and he's had more poles. But he's actually now equaled Michael Schumacher. Look, Michael came into sports through Jordan, and we love him, and we absolutely loved Ralph as well. So they were very good people. However, there were certain aspects of the way Michael raced that I didn't like. I didn't like when I went to, Irvine was with Jordan, and I did his contract with Ferrari. And I never liked the fact that we had to agree that Michael always had the right to be able to pull rank on him. And he had that with Massa, he had it with Barrichello, and Barrichello was another one of my drivers. So, you know, I knew firsthand what was going to happen. And I used to kick up stink at Ferrari and say, how can you let this driver dominate what effectively is your decision? Why do you let the driver say what's happening? It just diminishes the whole respect attitude and stuff like that. So a lot of small little things. I didn't like the way Michael pulled the punch in Monaco when he, in my opinion, willfully crashed to make sure he got pole position. I didn't like some of the things that he did in terms with Benetton and some of the underhand regulation rules. We won't go into it too much of it. I think this is not that kind of a program. But, you know, that's why I think that Lewis Hamilton, and I think probably no one has had it more difficult. And I'm not talking because he's a young black kid on the block, but I know his father. He's a very genuine man. I know where he's come from in Grenada, and he put everything on the line for his son. Now, I'm not saying that the Schumachers didn't do that, but the Schumachers had a karting track. It was easier for them. And I would have said, like in any sport, when we talk about racism and it should be kicked out of all sport entirely, I would say in a minority sport like motor racing, and for the first black kid on the block to come up and win 7 world titles, it has to be something quite unique and quite special. And I've given it some thought, because I've always felt that my old pal Alan Prost was the best driver in Formula One in my time, even above Senna and even above Schumacher. But I do now have to believe that that crown, that accolade, has to go to Lewis Hamilton, and we should respect him for that.
Yeah, and so say all of us, and like good comments, I think, about diversity and the lack of therein in Formula One, and what he's had to face, and how he's come up against it. He's a remarkable man. So how do you feel about Formula One now? When you look at it, are you concerned? Are you content? Does it look the way it always looked? You know, Mercedes in the 50s, Lotus to a certain extent in the 60s. You had various different levels of dominance from Ferrari and Lotus in the 70s. You run into the 80s. And there's always a team that's dominant. Or is it a little bit scary that you see 2x2 on the grid a little bit too much?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, people want competition, and do I? And I haven't really admitted this to many people, but do I have a look? I mean, am I going to say I can't do anything else on Sunday other than watch Bahrain? No, I'd rather be watching Chelsea Spurs, and because that's me now, and I'd prefer to be watching that, because that has a bigger interest for me, but partly because the championship is over. I love Bahrain. I would like to be there, but I'm not prepared to get on a plane, even though I'm still working and contracted to Channel 4. And so DC is doing most of them, Coulthard, and Mark Webber is doing some of the others that I'm not able to do or want to do. I'm not prepared. I don't want to wear a mask when I'm commentating. I don't want to have all of those tests every time I get on a plane, every time I go to a Grand Prix, and then you've got to test so many times during the week. You know, I'm 72 now. I feel incredibly fit, but I want to stay fit, and I want to be able to do every time I get in the plane. I feel either exhausted at 1 a.m. after long travels, and you lose a couple of days going and coming in terms of either jet lag or ability to keep your body tuned or up to a certain level of performance. And I'm not prepared to do it in the current COVID climate either. I don't want to either bring back something to the family or whatever it is that I have no control over. So I'm very happy. I'm very happy the way it is. I'm doing some podcasts, I'm doing some other things. But I've been able to grow the business with my kids, because I've got 4 children, and they spend much more time with me nowadays, either on the phone or on Zooms or whatever it is. Dad, what can we do there? Can we look at an investment there? How can we make that work, and various things? And I feel much more part of the family. And for that, COVID has again dealt me a great set of cards. And I've enjoyed it. Currently, I'm in Cape Town, and glorious sunshine. We've got a beach just outside the door, and I cycle almost every day because that's my real passion. And Marie is able to go and take her photographs. So
you're a bike
lucky
rider
guy.
these days, yeah? Like all of us, yeah.
Well, I've always probably, ever since I was at school in Sing Street, I used to cycle to school. And then we'd have during the summer around Bushy Park and indeed Orwell Park, we'd have races in the evening. And so how to cheat with my bike on the fixed wheels and take the brakes off to keep it light and stuff. I was a trickster. So anyway, I'm not going to tell you part of my little scams, but I was always a scammer.
I'd love to know how that was working. The future of Formula One, does it concern you? Where is it going?
Yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like the new rules. Actually, one of the funny things, it's remarkable how things are, but within 100 yards of where I am now lives Jody Scheckter, ex-world champion before Schumacher was the last person to win for Ferrari. And of course, Adrian Newey, who has won 20 world titles, both for drivers and constructors championships. And I cycle a lot with maybe 4 or 5 times a week with Adrian early in the morning, have our coffee and come back after a couple of hours or whatever. And we have the same thing to say. You know, Formula One is not like what it was in the 90s or even before that, but the times that I was there. And, you know, he's still passionate about building a better car than Mercedes, but he will admit that the Mercedes is a sensational car and deserves everything that it's got this year. He thinks he has a few things up his sleeve for next year, but fundamentally the cars aren't going to change. They've just got a couple of tokens. By that I mean they're able to change a couple of things. So if they change the front wing, it's 2 tokens. I don't know what people like Mercedes are going to, or McLaren are going to do, because they have to lose at least 1 token for the engine because they have to change, and then maybe the other token on the bodywork to be able to make the engine fit into the car. It seems very bizarre. It seems very contrived, very controlled. I'm just concerned that I wish, and I mean, this sounds like an old man here, which I most definitely probably am now, but it's like wishing something that happened in the past and you're reliving your dream. And I never want to be like that, because I'm so keen on young talent, on young enterprise, on young people having their say, standing up for themselves, designing new things, creating new things. That's where our future is. And we have to give the young people a chance. But I'm afraid Formula One, the administrators and the controllers of Formula One itself, I think they've taken their eye off the ball. I'm a huge fan of Bernie Ecclestone. I think what he had done was give a much more sporting spirit to the Formula. He gave it very edgy. I mean, it was never easy or never clear with him there, because it was always dodgy. And I like dodgy situations. So it seems to be very formal these days, and I can't cope with formality.
So capping the money is, you don't see that as being a huge value, and you don't see much in the aerodynamic regulations. They look expensive.
Well, here I'm going to ask you the question. Are you telling me if Mercedes have an idea, or if their engine department or their gearbox people will come up with a different set of materials or a different drivetrain or a different thing, that they're not going to tell the people their friends and brothers in Formula One, or somebody in the wind tunnel, they said, well, look, we have found by doing that and that, we're creating different types of vortex, we're creating more downforce, I mean, come on, Declan, it's just natural. Once you have knowledge, you can never take that knowledge away. If you've actually got something in your head, how can you just suddenly say, I'm not going to use it? Of course you can't do that, because you have the knowledge. And that's what really I felt critical of Formula One, penalizing Racing Point. Racing Point got the information from Mercedes 2 years ago, when they were entitled to get the information. So once you have that knowledge, you can't lose the knowledge. So the fact that they're using it now, it doesn't mean that, even though the rules have changed, you know, it's a bizarre situation. I would have definitely brought that to tribunal. I would have brought it to the world sports bodies, because there's no way it could have been succeeded.
Well, you mentioned Racing Point. Of course, the team, its DNA is Jordan Grand Prix, and it still retains
Yeah,
many of the same values, doesn't it? It subs out
and,
much of
and
its.
and people.
Yeah, and a lot of the
You
same
know,
people. They're remarkable. Yeah, yeah.
isn't it funny that Gary Anderson, the first person to carry when he came to Jordan Grand Prix, um, uh, uh,
Andrew
you know,
Green,
one was Mark Smith, and
Andrew Green.
Andy Green, and of course my friend who started with me in '86 was Andy Stevenson, and so he's still there. So he's the sporting director of the team. So is it the same people? Of course not, because the money that Stroll has put into it has given us a new lease of life. I don't know what went on between Mercedes and him and what technology has been transferred, but I've heard all sorts of rumors from Mercedes having a car in Racing Point's facility, and I now understand that to be totally false. And never, it was just, it was a very poor rumor that people tried to enlarge on, but it never did happen because it's been proven that it didn't happen. But nevertheless, the penalty for the points and for the money, if I was Racing Point, I would have taken them to task for it.
Yeah, kept pushing it. It's 30 years ago this month since Watty drove the first Jordan, the 911. Remarkable, isn't it? You probably scary thought. I don't know whether you thought about it. But
birthday is tomorrow. I've been asked about it. I mean, I hadn't even thought about this. So, ironically, the person who came up with one of the really cool remarks was a guy called Javi Krumbach from Otto Hebdo. And Otto Hebdo wanted a quote about it because it's, as you rightly say, it's 30 years tomorrow. And well, I couldn't have had anyone else drive the car, really. It had to be Watty, because he was our friend. He'd won several Grand Prix. He was an experienced guy. I needed somebody to really tell me, is this car drivable or is it not drivable? Because there's a philosophy in racing which I hold very strong to myself. As soon as you have a new car, the first running in that car is a massive indicator of where that car is likely to be. You can put more downforce on it, you can put more tires on it, you can put more wings on it, you put a better driver in it. But the fundamental feel through your ass, I'm allowed to say ass, because you're so low in the car that the feeling that it gives you in it's an immediate run is the sense of control of the style, how the car is likely to operate, and you actually work from the base. But if you've got a good base, and that car had a great base, to me is probably still to this day one of the nicest looking cars that ever was made.
It looked good in black and green.
The green was stunning, I have to say. And Ireland on the car, and you know, those politicians, Minister of Sport. I mean, come on, what they did was they stuck their neck out. But what I did to them, so as you know why Ireland was on the car, Ireland were looking to try and encourage people in Silicon Valley to look at Ireland as a destination. We had education, we had unbelievable health system, we had unbelievable staff, well-educated people who could actually give the knowledge that these American major corporates were looking for in Europe, and instead of going to other countries. And what the missing link was, Ireland was known as an agricultural country. We had missed out on the Industrial Revolution, but what we were very clever. We had a very strong base in terms of agriculture. But what we needed to be able to say, you know, look, we've got this brand new Formula One team, and Formula One is the height of technology. Don't worry, this is an area where we're going to. And that's how I convinced the Irish government to give me the money. But they use that a lot in terms of getting Dell there and getting other major corporates to come, which today is paying off handsomely in terms of what Ireland has been able to do as a centre for excellence in this area.
Well, where I was going with that actually is, I mean, Watty drove the car first, and of course you had Irvine through your hands. You gave him his start in Formula One, and sent him on to Ferrari with your good graces and good blessings. So
I'm sure I took a little bit on the way, but he took some back off me.
Yeah. I'm sure he's happy enough.
There's only one winner when you're dealing with Irvine, and it wasn't me.
Well, fair play, sharp, yeah, to Irishmen. But where's the next one coming from? I mean, 9 Grand Prix between them, 2 runners up in the World Championship. Is there? Can you see that in the future for Irish motor racing?
Well, you can never say never, because let's be very clear. Where this all kicked off was karting in Ireland, and then more especially Mondello Park. And Derek Daly created that, David Kennedy. And then there was people, Tommy Byrne, Michael Rowe, Bernard Devaney. I could go on and on. What we failed to realize is that there were some outstanding drivers. And those people, if you like, another 40, 50 years, they're still there. But we need to find a way of getting them out of it. And so people will say, oh, but we no money, we haven't. But look, let's be very clear. Michael Schumacher didn't have any money. Lewis Hamilton didn't have any money, and it goes on from there. And the same thing with Alonso. So where there's a commitment, but where there's a talent, first of all, we need to get people to believe. And that's the key word in life. And it's the biggest word that I've ever used, and that is to believe. So I've always believed in myself, and we as a nation and a country, for a very long time, certainly when I was growing up, there was a bit of an inferiority complex. And we soon got rid of that. But we always thought that Big Brother in England was always better than us. And we know that that's not the case. And we've got to make sure that we have the confidence, we have the belief in our ability, and we have the commitment to get out and fight for what we need to do. And those drivers are there. It just needs, but it does have a rota. It seems to have a rota. For example, for years there was no German drivers in Formula One, and then they got 7 world championships with Schumacher, and then 4 with Vettel. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So now there's a lot of German drivers, and then look back when the Prost era, and before that, Lafitte and Jabouille and all of the great guys that I was around with, probably Schlesser to a lesser degree, but there was a magic amount of French drivers. And what is remarkable about the situation for a great country like Italy, there has not been a world champion Italian since 1953 when Ascari won. So we have to be patient, and those people are there, and we have to encourage them and to come out and race, but not get sidelined, because there's really only one way to go, and that is karting, Formula Ford, Formula 3, Formula 1.
Are we ever tempted by the idea of doing a bit of driver management, just to
no,
giving a steer, giving someone a bit of a direction?
I did that all at the time when I was involved in the sport. When I stopped, look, I still, most of my really good friends are still in the sport. There's nothing when we talked about Jody now, I mean, and Adrian here, but if I was cycling in Monaco, my 2 favorite guys, well, everyone wants to cycle in Monaco because you have Max Verstappen and Daniel Ricciardo. But the people I work with, David Coulthard and Mark Webber. And sometimes when his legs don't give up on him, which is Mick Doohan, I mean, he comes out and cycles. But there is a great group of people that cycle really, really hard. But we're very lucky there, because there's a lot of, the Ineos team is based there, what was Sky. So they have their team home. You would find those cycling in the mountains on a daily basis. So, but the cycle boys and the motor racing people, and indeed Eugene Laverty, the motorbike guys. The one great thing about Monaco is that it's become a real fortress of sports people, and so it's quite easy to have 1 day a week, one evening we meet at 6 o'clock for a couple of drinks until 8 o'clock. And the amount of people and the names and the personalities that turn up there is just like a who's who from world sport. It's quite fascinating.
Yes.
Actually, the reason why on all of my cycling gear I have the tricolour on my thing is because if you look under the tricolour, it'll say Dignan. So because I wear these clothes all the time.
Anyway, you fit these clothes. That's impressive. Fair play to you. Listen, regards to Maria and your family.
Yeah, Maria's here. I better go and make some dinner. See you later.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Cheers, Eddie. Talk
Bye.
to you. Bye.